Good evening, and thank you for coming to the National Speleological Society's webinar series. Tonight we are joined by Bo Carroll. Bo is a member of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians and is the lead archaeologist for the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians Tribal Historic Preservation Office. He is currently in his first year of his doctoral thesis in anthropology at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. His research interest includes prehistoric art within the Dark Zone caves with an emphasis on Cherokee Syllabary. So I do ask that everyone stay on mute. Please put all your questions in the chat as we go along. We will answer them at the end. Just as a reminder, this is being recorded and you will be able to access us through the NSS website and through our YouTube channel. So Bo, thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, definitely any time. So I did want to kind of ask you a couple of questions before we began.
Okay.
So is there anything you would like to share with us just to start off with?
No, I don't think so. Answer your question.
Yeah. So inside Manitou Cave, which is in modern-day Alabama, 19th century Cherokees carried out sacred ceremonies and recorded their activities on the cave walls using Cherokee Syllabary, a system invented in nearby Willstown by Cherokee scholars. Sequoyah, do you mind discussing what syllabary means before we begin?
So around maybe the early 1800s, Sequoyah was a fluent Cherokee speaker. I don't think he could speak English or write English. He noticed that he was a silversmith, and he had noticed that people would pass messages on pieces of paper, and he had kind of wondered how they were doing that. And then through him watching people pass messages with English, he kind of thought, well, if they can do it, then I can do it too. So he started working. Historically, people think that he was crazy or he was practicing witchcraft. At least that's what the books say, but I don't think that's true. I think Cherokees are smarter than that. I think they all knew the gravity of what would happen if he was able to succeed with this. So it's an alphabet, like an English alphabet, but instead it uses syllables. Each 80, each syllable matches a sound within the Cherokee language, and it was just a way for Cherokee people to write. I think after a month after it being released, 90% of Cherokees were literate and they could read and write.
Oh, wow.
They had paper shortages, and we are the only Native American tribe to have a written language and a printing press, and they would pass secret messages through the printing press.
So my second question to you is, why did you decide to focus your research in archaeology in caves?
Well, I've always liked archaeology in history. Archaeology is just a destructive science. I was always destroying something to find out more about it. And then once I destroyed it, then it's just gone. And it was up to me to record it the best of my ability so I could recreate it for somebody else because it's not there anymore. Once I went into a cave and found out that I could do all this work with like seemingly limitless possibilities and not destroy a single thing, then I was kind of hooked after that. And plus, caves are cool. I thought we had caves here, but we have kind of rock shelters. There aren't caves here. So once I went into a cave and like actually experienced it, yeah, I enjoyed it. Yeah.
So my last question while we wait for people to enter is, what is the significance of cave archaeology being in the Dark Zone?
So I think from what I understand, the Dark Zone is just the part that doesn't see sunlight. So I guess the
deeper section, yeah.
The ecosystem is totally different. So if you take that and pair it with how Cherokees view caves as portals to another world, that would be the deepest you could go in there. In the Dark Zone, when that ecosystem changed, that would be when you're actually in that world. So if you're halfway, that middle zone, you're not actually in there yet. But once you get into that place where there's no sunlight, that ecosystem starts changing, then you're in another world in the Cherokee view. So you kind of, you pass that gateway, I guess.
That's beautiful. So I think we have most people here. So if you're ready to begin, let's do it.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. Thank you, Bo.
Well, I think I'd like to take the time to say thank you for asking me to give my presentation. We may look at caves differently, but I think in the end, we just want to protect resources. So I'm excited about this opportunity for collaboration. I'd like to thank the people who made this project possible, my fellow Cherokees who worked on this project with me, Tom Belt, Professor Julie Reed. I'd like to thank my advisor, Dr. Jan Schemick, and Alan Kressler. I'd also like to thank Annette, the property owner and protector of this special cave. One thing I forgot to add is that this cave is closed to the public, but she does do tours. And the Eastern Band helped gate it. So it's got a pretty substantial gate on it now. It's cut down a lot on vandalism. So with that out of the way, today we'll be talking about Indian writing. When we talk about Indian writing, there's incorrect examples and there's correct examples. So on the left, this is not the Indian writing we're going to be talking about today. This on the right, this is Cherokee Syllabary. So the writing that we're talking about today, it dates as early as 1828, probably earlier. So I use many different fields of study for this: linguistics, archaeology, history, ethnohistory. When I started, I just started with a single panel deep inside Manitou Cave near Fort Payne, Alabama. It's grown to include many different panels, and I keep adding different fields of study the more I work on it. So I was working on these translations before I had ever actually been inside this cave. Here in North Carolina, we don't have the same rock formations. Let's see. I had thought that I'd been in the cave until I had actually went into one. I didn't know how I would react. I assumed I would love it or hate it. A couple of things came to me before and during my first cave visit. First, the cave for traditional Cherokee is much different than somebody that's looking for outdoor activities. Caves are portals to the underworld that shouldn't be ventured into without extreme caution. There's also pollutants that can be picked up when you're in this other world. You have to be properly cleansed. You have to know how to cleanse yourself and be properly cleansed when you're exiting. You can pass this pollution on other people. So I was nervous. Most of the time I trust my instincts. If I feel like I'm doing something wrong, then I probably am. I'm usually correct when I feel this way. I've been in caves where I felt unwelcome. I've been in caves where I felt like I was intruding and I was an uninvited guest. I never felt this way in Manitou Cave. It also struck me that it stayed a constant temperature year round. And it made me question why I had been doing archaeology in cornfields in mid-July. Another thing that sealed it for me was that I did so much research in the cave and I never had to destroy a single thing. Like I said before, archaeology is destructive. I've always battled with this. My goal is always to preserve my past and my culture. Oftentimes they're in direct opposition with each other. I need to destroy my past in order to learn about aspects of my culture. So to say the least, I was hooked on caves from the first time I entered one. While I was in graduate school, I was trying to figure out a topic of my master thesis. Like I said before, I've always been interested in less destructive methods of archaeology, and I wanted to focus on those. I had seen other archaeologists using ground penetrating radar over large areas with minimal destruction. So I was interested in that. Went to the library, got a bunch of books, found out that it was a whole bunch of math, and I don't really care for math. I understand that it's very important. It's just not for me. So I hated my thesis topic before I even started. And my advisor told me that you need to pick something that you're interested in because you're probably going to end up hating it when you're done. And I picked this topic, which I'm still not tired of it, and I've been working on it for a long time. So I took a cave art class with my advisor, and he showed me a picture. He said, "Do you know what this? Do you know what this is?" And it was this writing that's on the cave wall. I said, "Well, it's Cherokee Syllabary. I recognize it." He said, "Do you know what it says?" I'm not fluent by any means. I had trouble, so I took it to my Cherokee language teacher, Tom Belt from Western Carolina University. We had he translate. Well, I say we, but he translated in about 30 minutes. So it was fairly easy for a first language speaker to translate. So, excuse me. In the Journal of American Antiquity, September 2011, they had included a photograph taken by my advisor, Jan Schemmer, from the University of Tennessee. They had a publication called Talking Leaves and Rocks That Teach, the archaeological discovery of Sequoiah's oldest written record. It was by some authors named Weeks and Tankersley. These are direct quotes. The first line is proper name, Ani Yan Lee, and they say it's glossed over in English as Cherokee for the word screamer. Further on the third line and to the right of 1828, they find the word April or Guboni. The interpretation of this photo isn't complete. Key points are left out in the actual meaning of the writing. my professor, Tom Belt from Western Carolina University, interprets this differently. So Weeks and Tankersley use Ani Yan Lee for the first line. We translate as leaders or ones who lead. According to Professor Belt, this is not a glossed over word for screamer. The second line of Weeks and Tankersley is not translated, but the key to understanding this message. Tikwana Itzo is a term used for the Cherokee stickball game. It can be interpreted as leaders of the stickball team. Weeks and Tankersley continue on to the third line, which is correctly labeled 1828. One finds the word Duwoni, but only half the syllables are translated. Guwona Kalan are in their month. So what looks like an illegible syllable is actually an English number 30 with E, God meaning day. So I think well, they didn't even get the number right. They had a hard time translating this. Let's see. So in this particular picture, the words leaders are you will lead. Stickball, 1828, in their month, the 30th day. So in the Cherokee language, the sentences are formed backwards from English sentences. So if you wanted to say, I want water, it's ama agua de lihan. And that literally translates to water I am wanting. So dates would be used with the same method. So the interpretation has several important factors that exist in the background. Understanding Cherokee worldviews gives insights that others don't possess. The stickball term being an old term that isn't being used anymore. The use of in their month. Cherokees don't view time in months, but rather seasons. So I took this as a stab towards that. Another thing is I have a date. So a reporter asked me one time, how did you get a date from this? Did you use destructive analysis? And I'm assuming she was talking about scraping the charcoal from the wall. And I said, well, clearly you haven't read my paper. I said, Sequoyah submitted the syllabary in 1820. I have a date of 1828. I'm pretty confident that I can narrow it down and give you a date. So I always have trouble with this one. Ayansili Tas, I am your grandson. This was a way of writing that focused on the old ones or the ancestors who came before us. It's not a literal translation. This would be used in prayer and medicinal formulas. This phrase is written on the ceiling about midway through the cave. The ancestors aren't humans like us, they're older, and they were here before the Cherokee. They are very powerful. They give us gifts such as cures for sickness and knowledge, and they are included in many of our ceremonies. So to the bottom right, you can see myself and Professor Julie Reed at scale for the placement of the writing. So the writing occurs about 35 to 40 foot up in the air. See if I can make this work. If you can see my mouse, the ledge is here. And it's about 10 to 15 foot stretch over this ledge to reach where they had wrote. So I was trying to acquire the difficulty and seemingly impossible placement of this artwork from experienced caver Alan Kressler. He seemed puzzled. He said, I'm not sure how they wrote that there. The second explanation came from Tom Bell. A long time ago, people could do things that other people today could not. These people would have been extremely powerful. They could do impossible feats such as flying. Tom Bell told me that just because you couldn't get up there doesn't mean that they could. The first was scorched with a torch or lantern, and then they scratched over to show a clear with black background. Difficult, not complete, and it's believed to refer to Dak-Shemin turtle. They can use, oftentimes Cherokee use Dak-She turtle interchangeable with women, so that's kind of a representation of a female, I think. So some of the other syllables are written backwards, like if you held it up to a mirror. Find Sasa, that means goose. Find his signature along with the writing. It's not a stretch to say he's the same person who wrote in another cave in the same area. I found another Sasa signature. So the writing on the ceiling of Manitou Cave being backwards could be explained by viewing the caves as portals to the underworld. In this world, everything would exist, but it would be reversed. Words would be written backwards with phrases. Everything would be a mirror image. Cold would be hot, light would be dark, etc. One thing when I started working with caves is I noticed it was hot outside, it was cold inside, and it was light outside, it was dark inside. So I kind of see where they were coming from, viewing it that way. So certain types of prehistoric Cherokee art, it depicts animals kind of upside down on the ceiling, like if they were swimming above you and you were in the water below them. So I just thought that was cool. So this translation can offer more insight into Cherokee minds and lives, and I think if I continue studying this, I can provide key components within different Cherokee cosmology and life ways. So this particular panel is hard to see, and we probably wouldn't have found it if we hadn't been looking for Cherokee Syllabary. We would have missed it if we didn't know Syllabary was in this cave at all. These syllables are probably a 1/2 inch by 1/4 inch, and they're kind of up under a ledge about knee height. So when we found this, we were pretty much crawling around on the floor looking at stuff. You had to be pretty close to be able to see it. So this says, Mr. Richard Guest, Digi a ni ska wo diga ho dun galan tulungi. We who are those that have blood come out of their nose and mouth. I see she gi young guns. I'm a respectable man or a man of authority. So here's an enhanced version of what we were looking at. And we did some drawings and lined up the syllabary with it so you can see it matches up fairly well. So I had a feeling that, let's go and get this work. I had a feeling that this right here said guess, but I didn't have anything to compare it to. I just wanted it to be that. And one of the first things I learned in archaeology was that you have biases, and you put those biases within your work. And I kind of was looking for that here. So I didn't really say anything. I kind of kept it to myself and just kind of wanted it to be that. And over the course of my work, I show different colleagues my pictures. You know, I talk to them, talk stuff over with them. And I had showed Dr. Brett Riggs from Western Carolina University some pictures, especially of the signature. He loves to dig. He'll dig in the dirt. He'll dig in archives. He's the only non-Cherokee person I know that has a Cherokee name. They call him the White Groundhog. So he just happened to be in the National Archives and came across the signature. And just one night, I got an email from him, and it just said, "Look what I found." And it was this document. So when I look closer at this, it matched up pretty good. I was pretty confident that it was Richard Guest, Sequoyah's son, the inventor of the syllabary, that had wrote this on this wall. So these documents right here are military records. So right before removal, or right before forced removal, so the Trail of Tears, which would have been 1838, around 1825, the federal government starts rounding up Cherokees, telling them that they had to leave. It wasn't like a big shock. Everybody knew what was going on already. It's just that there wasn't anything they could do about it. So the first part of relocation was trying to get people to go willingly. So the United States government went to Cherokees and said, "We have so many acres of land in Arkansas or northeast Oklahoma, and if you move there, we'll let you take your stuff with you. So you can load up wagons with your stuff, and you can move willingly and just give up." And a lot of people took that. So they moved in groups. And I think that group would be called the Nighthawks. And they live in Oklahoma. It's another separate tribe of Cherokees. But what they would do was white speculators would prey on Cherokees, and they would either charge them 3 or 4 times the amount it was supposed to actually cost, or they would just either do that and then take their stuff, or just take their stuff. So they wouldn't end up with anything. So Cherokees combated this by that if you had wagons and horses and you could move goods, then another Cherokee would hire you to do this, and you would contract through the federal government. So that this is where this document's coming from. Richard Guest, Sequoyah's son, moved some goods for a Cherokee family. I think it said they paid him $16. So it's a pretty good haul, I bet, pre-removal. Too far. So this particular founder, it gives us a lot of information in regard to the people surrounding this cave, what this cave was used for, the cave's location, the area known as Willstown by the Cherokee. It was like a political capital. It was where Sequoyah invented the syllabary. With the information from the stickball panel in the same cave providing context, I interpret it to mean that the ones who would bleed from nose and mouth would have been a stickball team that had suffered a defeat. A ball team that suffered a defeat would be injured. Most would literally have bloody noses and mouths. This goes directly with some of the other writing in Manitou Cave. Could be a secretive location used to prepare for the game and to be doctored after. Like today, Cherokee doctors specialize in certain things like headaches, physical mobility, love spells, and stickball. So the bloody noses and mouth, I have personal experience with that. I played stickball a couple years when I was younger, and if somebody's not bleeding at the end of the game, then they didn't play the way they're supposed to be playing. I've seen a lot of broken people, broke bones. That was a regular occurrence. If you could take rugby, lacrosse, wrestling, and football and take all your protective gear away, so all you have is a pair of shorts and 2 sticks. It's like that, except you have rules, but the rules are, like an example would be, you have to use your stick to pick the ball up from the ground. You can't pick it up with your hand. That's a rule. The physical part of what you could do to somebody else, there's no rules for that. It's you kind of do it. The only thing that keeps the game in check would be you don't want to do something to somebody because they're probably going to come back and do it to you. So that's kind of that kept the game moving and kept it less violent, if you could say that. So here we have a team. We'll talk about stickball some more. So here we have a team. This is from the Cherokee Indian Reservation. And right here, I don't know if you can still see my mouse. Right here is the doctor. He's getting ready for the game. Here's the players over here. So he's doing his medicine, preparing for the game. There's another team probably in a different location because they won't prepare. in the same place. So when you play stickball, it's for different reasons. The game's called the Little Brother of War. It's used for young men to practice both preparation and hand-to-hand combat. It's a good way to prepare for war, but without actually having to kill somebody or be killed. Cherokee traditions, there are two states of existence. You have a white state or a peace state. And this is the state that you're normally in. But when you're preparing for war, preparing for a ball game, then you need to be put into a war state or a red state. This would be for protection for upcoming games or battles. So you're preparing to kill somebody or somebody to kill you. That's not a normal way to walk around regular people, I guess. So you don't want to be around people in the opposite state because it conflicts with each other. It could weaken your state or transfer to theirs. So you need seclusion to properly prepare to be in this red state. Once you're in that state, you need seclusion to be away from people. And once you're wanting to come out of that state, you need seclusion too. So just this seclusion alone is enough to seek places like caves to prepare for things. So each team would have a designated medicine man, the guy that's to the left. He specialized in stickball medicine to help prepare for the game. Like a neurologist or an optometrist, Cherokee medicine men would be proficient in one area of medicine. So when Cherokee doctors are concerned, the people who play the game are not important. It's a contest between the strength of the two doctors. Whoever wins the battle wins the game. So Richard Guest, the son of Sequoyah, is likely to have been the medicine man for the ball team from Willstown. He could have written about this on the cave wall after a particularly important tough game. We do know that by his signature, the fact that he wrote in first person points to Richard Guest, Sequoyah's son, being the author of this particular panel. Richard Guest, I found him in Raccoon Creek in Georgia. It's about 50 miles southeast of Willstown. The fact that all over this cave graffiti appears dating back to the 1800s, I think Richard, like everyone else, just wanted people to know that he was there. Richard was here. He had suffered a loss. And due to pressures from surrounding missionaries, state and federal governments, the Cherokees continued to assimilate into white culture. Many Cherokees' traditional practices were banned. The need for seclusion was needed even more. So to prepare for the Cherokee ball game, it's always required seclusion due to contamination, like I explained before. The cave was being used as locations for preparations by the team and for seclusion and continued practice traditions by the Cherokee. So another part of my studies was looking at how these missionaries moved in. So you're taking these Cherokees and surrounding tribes. So you got Creeks, some other types of Indian tribes, and you're compressing them into one place, and you're taking their hunting ground. So you're taking their food supply. There's no way for them to make money, and their families are starving. So you got these compressed Cherokees in these small spaces, and you have these missionaries moving in. The missionaries say, if you join our church and you become a good Christian, we'll feed your family, we'll clothe your family, your kids can go to school, we'll teach them English, we'll teach them just different subjects. So, I mean, you don't really have a choice but to do that. But traditional Cherokee practices were looked down on at this point in time. They weren't banned yet, but they were looked down on. So if you were caught just attending this game, not even playing in it, then you were considered doing the devil's work, and you were subject to being kicked out of the church. So they would kick you out of the church, and they would pull your support, your food and your clothing for your family. So at this point in time, there was a real need for this seclusion, and a lot of things went hidden. Even today, we still practice these same traditions, but today they're still hidden. You have to know where they are. It's not public knowledge. You have to know somebody and know where they are to be able to go there. And I think that's carried over from this point in time. Pre-contact, if you were a Cherokee, you didn't have to hide. Like, nobody's going to come up to where you're practicing your traditions at. Like, it just wasn't that way. Let's see. So here's a map of where the cave is and where you can see it, Richard Guess and the Goose Lid. So this is a pretty well established path that they could have went on. I'm always surprised at how much people moved around and how far they moved during this time. They didn't have main roads or cars, but they went everywhere. So every time I go in this cave, I find something new. People weren't thinking of finding syllabary within these caves, but once we started looking, it shows up everywhere. The caves are filled with modern graffiti, but without this tribal consultation and working knowledge of Cherokee tradition, syllabary can be misinterpreted or overlooked. Tribal consultation was the key to understanding the syllabary. It could serve as an example of how important it will be in the future. This project included many different Cherokee scholars, native Cherokee speakers, elders, different syllabary classes from the Qualla Boundary. I included children from the Cherokee Language Immersion Program. In this school, children are only spoken to in the Cherokee language. So I'm discovering syllabary all the time. Nearly every time I visit a cave, I find syllabary. This cave, every time I visit, I find a little bit. And I think my work is going to continue with my community. I think that's the most rewarding part about my work. So I think to close out, I would like to talk about what it felt like to work on this cave, or just caves in general, or me being a Cherokee and working on Cherokee stuff. When I first started working on this cave, I was just like really interested. I wanted to know what the translations were. I was excited to know what they said. I was happy about that. That's about the only feeling that I had. Then I started thinking how, once I started going in these caves, I started thinking about how Cherokees interact with places such as caves. Because you're not just going into a cave, you're entering into another world. So you're taking that responsibility that you are strong enough to be able to traverse both of these worlds safely. Before, if you didn't know how to do that, you wouldn't go into a cave. So I never really thought about it in depth until I started going in caves. This project gave me a better understanding of my own traditions. It made me realize not much has changed in the way we practice our traditions. The way our ancestors did before us, it's almost the same. So I'm excited about how much of our culture we retained when it was trying to be destroyed or taken away from us. So almost 100 years later, I can still read this. I had a good grasp on what they were talking about. So all these things made me feel good about traditional Cherokee culture, being alive. When I started looking into the area where this cave is and all the historical significance, I learned a great deal about important Cherokee figures such as Sequoyah. I have a better understanding of how Cherokees were being proactive in the face of oppressions and removal. When you read history books, Cherokees are never actors in their story. It's always told from the outside looking in. Cherokees always have to react to an outside influence. This research was never that way. I never intended it to be that way. This story was created by past Cherokee, researched by the present day Cherokee for present and future generations. So in my experience, not many of these exist. So with all my work, I experience it with a little sadness about what my ancestors had to go through. Then this feeling turns into gratitude for the sacrifices that they made for me to be talking about this today. Yeah, I hope that was what you guys were looking for, because that's all I got. I'm open to questions. If I can figure out how to do the chat, then I'll try to answer some of them.
Thank you so much, Bo. Let's see. I have some questions, and we can also we can do it by unmuting people. So would you want me to read? Would it be easier for you if I read the questions, or would you, do you want me to suggest people to unmute from time to time, and I can unmute, which is better for you?
I don't even know what I'm doing.
You're doing great. That's what you're doing. So, so the first question I have is, behind the medicine man was a row of women. What was their role?
I also have that question.
They dance, so you could dance for up to 7 days. You fast and you dance. There's a lot of sleep deprivation involved, so it's you're getting into this altered state before you play, as opposed to, I think some Indian tribes use hallucinogens, so they didn't really use hallucinogens. So that's what the men are doing. The women, for you to be able to hold these ceremonies, you have to have women. So Cherokees, it's all about balance: white, black, man, woman, up, down. So without a woman, you're not able to have those dances that's required for you to be able to play stickball.
So I had a question personally about the purification process, because you were saying so you had almost 2 purification processes. You had the seclusion process for a lot of these rituals in the games, but you said there was a purification process to go into the cave itself. Am I misunderstanding?
There's more of a getting what you bring. You don't want to bring what's inside the cave back outside with you, because it kind of sticks to you. So there's a cleansing process once you come out. There's not really a cleansing process going in. I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, so, and you were saying something about Cherokee grammar, and it sounded like it was direct object, verb, then subject. Is that correct?
Yeah, water, I am wanting. So you say I'm not good at English, the noun. We just said the noun before.
Yeah. So the predicate, and then where was it? Verb next?
Water, I am wanting. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, the verb last. Interesting. Yeah. Let's see. Go back to the chat. Do we have, if anyone has any other questions? How far into the cave do you usually see the writing?
So it's usually completely dark. It happens maybe like a quarter of the way in, and then halfway in, and then all the way at the back. But it seems like it's more just people writing their names towards the front. And then the further you get back, I think the more powerful the message becomes, maybe. I think that goes back to that dark zone question that you asked me earlier.
So for Manitou, how deep is the cave?
I can't remember, but I wanted to think it's pretty good sized cave. I can't remember what it was.
So is there any like technical vertical techniques to go? Is it mostly walking passage? What's the overall?
So they had converted this cave to a show cave, and they cemented walkways and steps, and they had places in the middle where they would have balls, so that they would have orchestras set up. They had electricity run through, and they would have orchestras set up with bands, and they would have balls where people would come, I guess, Saturday night, and they would dance. And I mean, it's a humongous cave.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The back part near the end where the football field is, that's the hardest part to get to, and it's still not very hard.
How many individual signatures have you counted? Just curious, how many people had ventured?
So, are you just talking about Cherokee people?
Yes, that's what it's, so this is Rosanna.
So these are just these are the what I took to be the most important ones to translate. This isn't by far all the syllabary that's in this cave. So there are names that don't really have a translation. So say your name was Mary. If you say your given name was Mary and you wanted it to be a Cherokee name, then people would call you Maylee, and that's how you would write it in syllabary. So if you write Melee in syllabary and a Cherokee person reads it, there's not really a meaning except for the name English for Mary. So it's like there's a lot of those, just like Mary or just regular names that don't really have meanings that are wrote out through the cave. So there's a lot in there.
Oh, wow.
I don't know an exact count, but it's over 20.
So so the question is, how was it known that there were writings in the cave? So I'm interpreting that as how did people discover that these syllabaries were there, or that it was Cherokee writing?
So I can't remember the names of the people, and that's awful because my advisor is going to be extremely upset with me because I can't remember these names. But so
I'll tell on you later.
So there's graffiti everywhere in the caves. Like people wrote right on top of each other. And if you're not comfortable, if you're not familiar with Cherokee Syllabary, it just looks like any other kind of, like, because people back then, they wrote weird English. They made weird like alphabetical symbols. They made them look weird. So syllabary kind of blends in with that. If you're not looking for it, you miss it. But there was people that recognized some writing and they thought that it looked different. And they just so my advisor Young from Tennessee, he's a prehistoric cave, pretty much a specialist. So if you want to know something about caves in southeastern United States, you ask him. And somebody had showed him the pictures of that writing. I think he recognized it.
The next question is, have you examined the writing in Howard's Waterfall Cave?
Yeah, I've examined that writing, and that's one of my next projects.
Oh, wow. Where is that? I don't know. So can you give?
Right outside of Trenton, Georgia. So it's probably 60 miles from each other, these two caves. And that's the Goose's signature. He wrote in there too. That's the other cave I was talking about.
So this kind of touches back on when you first talked in the beginning of your slide. Can you describe the heaviest spiritual presence you have ever felt in a cave?
Oh my God, yeah. So I don't know if you guys watched The Story of God with Morgan Freeman. Well, anyways, it's on there. So I think it's season 2, episode 2. He came to Tennessee and he met with me and my advisor. We took him to a cave called Dunbar Cave. I think it's in Clarksville, Tennessee, almost in Kentucky. We took him in that cave, and I had been there before. And there's a really long panel that has a man laying down. I want to think he's morphing into an animal. His legs are, at least. And I had been in there and I had seen that, and I never felt anything weird the first time I went in there. But the second time I went in there with Morgan Freeman, they had all those cameras and all that film crew, and we're all in this cave. And I get in there and I'm kind of standing there in the dark, and I just get this feeling like you're not supposed to be here. Like all of these people aren't supposed to be here. And this artwork that I see on these cave walls, I think that it's a depiction of who lives in that cave. That if you go through that portal, that's who you're going to encounter. So you had a good grasp of who that is, and if you knew how to ask them for help, they could help you with things. So that was kind of like this is my house, so you better be careful, pretty much. So and I started feeling that I'm not supposed to be here. So I turned around to the producer and I said, man, we're not supposed to be here. And he said, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know. You guys can do what you want to. I'm leaving. And I just turned and walked out. But they filmed me saying that, and they used it for for their commercial. So it's like, it just pans to my face, and they're like, we're not supposed to be in here. It's like, dun, dun, dun. Like, tune in next week to find out why this Cherokee archaeologist don't want to be in this cave. But like, I really felt like I had to leave right then, and I did. And that's probably the strongest presence I've ever felt. Every other time, I mean, you guys know, you've been in caves, like you hear stuff, you see stuff, but it's never scared me until that particular time.
I think we've talked about that. You trust your gut. So the same person, but the next question on this is, and I wanted to do this a little separately. It's like, do you feel that caves with more evidence of historical native presence, so I guess more syllabary, more artifacts, have a greater spiritual presence? So are you, like, when you see this remnants, this archaeological remnants, do you still feel like, is there a correlation?
Um, yeah, there's different cases that I've been in that don't necessarily have syllabary, but they have um, different depictions of certain things, as opposed to different caves that have different feelings. And I think I've kind of figured that out. The artwork kind of coincides with the burial, and the burials are in the caves, and I kind of feel it's a different vibe, I guess, than just a cave that has syllabary in it. So I think there were, regardless of what's written on the walls in the caves are millions of years old, and the Cherokees knew that they were there and they were utilizing it. So I guess it just depends on how you feel once you get in there.
And the last question for this part, there's some more questions, I'm sorry. How do you acknowledge the spiritual presence? So when you feel the a spiritual presence, how do you acknowledge it?
So I used to want to think that like I wanted to apologize, and then I started thinking like I'm not doing anything wrong, so why am I apologizing? So I'm just kind of like I think in my head about my intent, why I'm there, the reason that I'm doing the work that I'm doing, the people that I'm doing the work for. Like my work's for Cherokees to start with. So I'm kind of thinking that. And then I just kind of go in, and I mean, well, I forgot what the question was.
Oh, it's how you acknowledge the spiritual aspect.
Oh, yeah. Once I get in there, I keep that in my head, my intentions, why I'm there. I'll be respectful. I'm not loud, I guess. I go by the way I feel. And then I always so Native American people in general like gifts, and there's always this balance that you have to maintain. So when I go into a cave, I assume that I'm disrupting that balance, and I need to give something to be able to maintain it. And a good thing to take is tobacco, because it was a hard thing to get, and a lot of people liked it. So I usually, if you're ever in a cave and you see some tobacco kind of piled up in the corner, that's me.
Next one is the date ranges for these signature sites, because you talked a little bit about that you had writings that you could help identify it, but do you have a range for all these syllabary signatures you're finding?
So if you do destructive analysis and you do carbon dating, you can take carbon and it'll give you a date, but it's kind of plus and minus 100 years. So I mean, you could say, well, this came from this year, but it could be 100 years later or 100 years before. So I got a date just from the date that was on the wall, which was 1828. Sequoyah submitted his syllabary in 1820. So I'm very certain it was between 1810 and 1828. And that's way better than a carbon date can give you. And I didn't have to destroy anything. The syllabary, I think if we could figure out when he actually first started working on it, because his kids would have picked that up and they would have been out writing on the wall. So I'd say from 1800 to 1820, 1828, that'd be a good guess for the syllabary in this case.
Is stickball considered a medicine game?
I don't know what you mean by medicine game.
Leah, do you mind unmuting so you can ask your question?
Of course. Hi. So from my understanding, like the Onondaga and the tribes out further east use like lacrosse as a medicine game. So it's like good for the people. It raises their spirits. Is that the way that stickball is treated, or is it is it more like specifically for like war practice?
So we have a dance called the booger dance, and whatever kind of influences that. But so smallpox came, so we got these hornet masks. So we poke eye holes in them and wear them while we're dancing. That represents your face when you get smallpox. When white people came, we had masks that represented white people. So we do those dances, and it kind of makes fun of the problems that you're having, and it kind of makes you forget a little bit and laugh. It's like an escape when there's no other escape to be had. We use that's like a medicine dance. What you're saying, stickball was more of it was entertainment. A lot of Cherokee people love to gamble, and they would gamble a lot on these games. It was a good way to settle land disputes. If you got in an argument with another tribe, you could settle it that way as opposed to going to war with them, which is actually smart because you save people from dying. You keep the people alive, and you used it to settle scores between clans. So we have a clan system, so it'd be like families, and then you would use it to. So you're not always fighting with somebody, and if you're a young warrior, you want a way to prove yourself. This is a good way. If you're good at stickball, then you're a good warrior, and then to practice for war. But yeah, I think we had different ways of handling that but there is medicine involved a lot. It's just wasn't intended for that, I don't think.
So this next question, I'm going to actually ask the person to unmute. I'm going to ask and then ask them to unmute because I'm not quite sure I understand it. So do you think intention perhaps drives the experience of spiritual presence? So Bree, do you mind kind of asking that a little better than me?
Sure. So my question, Bo, is, do you think that the intention perhaps drives the experience of the spiritual presence? For instance, like when you went with the group with Morgan Freeman, you were going for, reasons that could have perhaps been interpreted as exploitation, right? So do you think that intention drives what kind of spiritual experience you have?
I think that for me it does. I don't think that it does for everybody. If you're not looking for it, you're not going to find it. So people that would go in these caves and loot and just take whatever they could find and dig, destroy whatever they wanted, write their names on the walls. I don't know if they were spiritually aware or connected, and they might have known weird things were happening, but they might have not put two and two together. They might have died an early death. They might have had really bad luck. Nobody knows, but I think for me, the intent does mean how the caves are going to interact with me. Unless I'm sure I'll find a cave that I'm not supposed to be in at all ever, and then I'll feel it, regardless of my intent.
Does anyone have any more questions? I think I got them all that are in the chat. So on behalf of the NSS, I want to say thank you, Bo, for joining us tonight, for everyone being here and listening and sharing in this experience. I know I learned a lot. I'm looking forward to further collaborations with you as on behalf of the Education Division and the NSS. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.